So there's this town called Grover's Mill in rural Pennsylvania. Small town, old town, the kind of place where the houses have been standing since your grandfather's grandfather was alive, where the roads don't have sidewalks because nobody really walks anywhere, where the nearest McDonald's is a 20-minute drive, and people are perfectly okay with that. And at the very end of Miller Road, past the grain silo, past the old Baptist church, past the 3 broken mailboxes that nobody has fixed in 15 years, there is a house, white walls, green shutters, a big oak tree in the front yard so old that its roots have cracked the driveway in 3 places for most of its life. That house was just a house. Until the Harmon family moved in. Dan Harmon was 36 years old. His wife Carol was 34. They had a daughter named Lily, 8 years old, missing her 2 front teeth and obsessed with drawing horses in her notebook. They moved to Grover's Mill in the spring of 2017 because Dan had gotten a job at a manufacturing plant nearby. And the house was cheap and the town was quiet. And they wanted Lily to grow up somewhere safe, somewhere peaceful, somewhere away from the noise of the city. I want you to remember that because that is exactly what they wanted. And that is exactly what they did not get. The first thing that happened was small, so small that Carol almost didn't mention it. About 2 weeks after they moved in, so she started hearing sounds at night. Not loud sounds, not scary movie sounds, just sounds that didn't belong. A slow dragging sound from somewhere above the ceiling, like something being pulled slowly across the attic floor. She told Dan. Dan went up to the attic with a flashlight. Nothing there. Old insulation, some cardboard boxes from the previous owner, a broken chair, dust everywhere, no animals, no holes in the roof, no explanation. Dan said it was probably the house settling. Old houses make sounds. Carol's accepted this because she wanted to accept it. But the sound kept coming back every night, same time, then on around 2 a.m., that slow, quiet drag across the ceiling. 3 weeks later, Lily started talking about the man. Kids say things, and Carol knew this. Lily had an imagination the size of a continent. She drew horses that could fly and invented friends with elaborate backstories, and once convinced herself for an entire week that there was a dragon living in the school gym. So when Lily mentioned the man, Carol didn't panic. She just asked, casually, the way you do, "What man, baby?" And Lily said, "The man who stands in my doorway at night." Carol put down what she was doing. What does he look like?" Lily thought about it, the way kids think, looking up at the ceiling, turning it over in her mind. Tall, she said, and he doesn't have a face. Carol told herself it was a dream. She told Dan that night. Dan said it was definitely a dream. Kids have vivid dreams. They confuse dreams with reality all the time. Nothing to worry about. They both went to sleep telling themselves that. Neither of them slept very well. The second month, things got harder to explain. The kitchen lights started turning off by themselves. Not flickering, just going off. Completely off. In the middle of meals, in the middle of conversations, off. Dan called an electrician. The electrician checked everything. Wiring was fine. Connections were fine. He found nothing wrong and charged them $200 for the privilege of finding nothing wrong. The lights kept going off, and then one evening, Carol was washing dishes after dinner. Dan was helping Lily with homework at the kitchen table. Normal evening, quiet house. Carol looked up from the sink and looked out the window above it. In the backyard where it is standing at the edge of the tree line where their property met the woods, there was a figure. Tall, dark clothing, standing completely still, facing the house. Carol froze. She stood there with wet hands and a racing heart, and she stared at this figure standing in her backyard at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday evening. "Dan," she said very quietly. "Yeah?" "There is someone standing in our backyard." Dan was up from the table before she finished the sentence. He looked out the window. The figure was gone. Dan called the police that night. An officer came out, walked the property with a flashlight, found nothing, no footprints, no broken fence, no sign that anyone had been standing at the tree line. The officer was polite and professional and completely unhelpful. After he left, and Dan and Carol sat at the kitchen table for a long time without saying anything. Finally, Dan said, "Do you want to move?" And Carol said, yes, but they didn't move. because they had just signed a 12-month lease and because Dan needed this job, because they had spent everything they had on the moving truck and the deposit and the first month's rent. So they stayed. And that, looking back, what was the decision that changed everything. What I know, it was a Friday night in October when it all came apart. Dan was working a late shift. Carol was home alone with Lily. She had put Lily to bed at 8:30 and was sitting on the couch watching TV with every light in the house turned on. All of them, because Carol had stopped turning lights off at night weeks ago at 11:15 p.m. She heard it. Not the attic sound, something different. Downstairs, in the basement, a knock, 3 slow knocks from underneath the basement door. Carol sat very still on that couch. Her phone was in her hand. She dialed Dan. No answer. He was on the floor of the plant, too loud to hear his phone. She sat there for 5 minutes. Silence. She told herself it was a pipe. Old houses had noisy pipes. It was nothing. It was absolutely nothing. And then the basement door opened. Carol ran. She did exactly what every instinct in her body told her to do. She ran upstairs. She grabbed Lily from her bed. She locked herself in the master bedroom. She pushed the dresser against the door, and she called 911. The operator stayed on the line with her. She could hear footsteps downstairs. Slow, unhurried, moving through her house like they belonged there. Police arrived in 4 minutes. They found the basement door open. They found the back door, which Carol was certain she had locked, standing wide open. And in Lily's bedroom, on the wall above her bed, Mina, someone had written 3 words in black marker. I see her. Police investigated for 6 weeks. They found fingerprints in the basement that did not match anyone in the Harmon family. They traced them through the national database. The prints belonged to a man named Curtis Vane, 43 years old, from Reading, Pennsylvania, 40 miles away. Curtis Vane had been arrested twice before, once for breaking and entering in 2011, and once for stalking a family in Chester County in 2014. He had served time for both. And when police went to his address, he was gone. His apartment was cleaned out. No furniture, no clothes, nothing. Like he had been watching and knew they were coming. They found Curtis Vane 11 days later in a motel room outside of Harrisburg. He didn't run when police knocked on the door. He just opened it and looked at them, completely calm, completely unsurprised, like he had been waiting. In his motel room, police found photographs of the Harmon house, photographs of the backyard, photographs taken through windows, and photographs of Lily playing in the yard, walking to the school bus, drawing in her notebook on the front porch, like hundreds of photographs taken over weeks. Curtis Vane was arrested that day. He was charged with criminal trespass, stalking, breaking, and entering and making criminal threats. At trial, his defense argued he was mentally ill and had become obsessed with the house itself, not the family. The jury didn't care about the distinction. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison. The Harmon family moved out of the house on Miller Road the day after Curtis Vane was arrested. They didn't pack carefully. They didn't clean. They just put what they could in their car and they left. Carol told a journalist later, people ask me if I feel better now that he's in prison. And I say yes. Of course, he can't hurt us. She paused. But Lily still sleeps with the light on. She's 11 now. She still sleeps with the light on. And sometimes in the morning, she tells me she dreamed about the man with no face standing in her doorway. And I don't know anymore if she's remembering a dream or if she's remembering him. The house on Miller Road is empty now, has been since the day the Harmons left. Nobody has rented it. Nobody has bought it. The oak tree is still there. The roots still cracking the driveway. The green shutters still hanging on the white walls. Everything exactly as it was. Except now the neighbors say, sometimes late at night, they still see a light moving through the upstairs window, and there is no one inside.